Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. The webinar will begin in just a second. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the webinar to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered. And we are streaming this webinar on our Facebook Live page as well. All resources that you see shared as links in the chat box will be compiled and shared in a follow-up email that will go to all webinar registrants, and materials will be accessible on GLR's Community Learning for Impact and Improvement platform, also known as CLIP. Please take 30 seconds to create an account if you haven't yet so that you do not miss the bios, slides, and other resources from today's session. Finally, we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week on May 25th, we have an exciting doubleheader with a partner webinar at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time titled Engaging Business Leaders as Multifaceted Champions for Grade Level Reading that will explore the important contributions of corporate partners in the work to accelerate learning as we emerge from the pandemic. At 3 p.m. Eastern Time that same day, we have another important Learning Loss Recovery Challenge session titled Teachers Respond, Data Implications on the Composition of Their 2021-2022 Classroom. That follows our co-sponsored session with EdWeek from April 27th that explored the implications of data, indicating that there will be challenges associated with the changing composition of K through third grade classrooms next fall. We'll be sure to add a link in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. Joining you now is Emily Samos, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and hello, everybody, and welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Parents Speak, Ready for Bold Change in K-12 Education. Today's exchange of ideas continues our Learning Loss Recovery Challenge series and our ongoing discussions about parents as critical partners and the importance of raising and responding to their voices as schools implement strategies to accelerate learning. After a year of school closures and managing to maintain as much learning continuity as possible with their children at home or in hybrid settings, parents now, more than ever before, have a deep understanding of what their children most need to learn effectively. And with a wealth of resources now available to schools to recover and accelerate learning after a year of disruptions and the anticipated possibility to return to a mostly normal in-person schedule in the fall, it is critical for policy and decision makers to hear from parents and ensure an effective handoff by implementing strategies that respond to what they are saying they want and need for their children's learning. And so today we get to learn more about just what parents are saying they want for their children and what they expect from schools as they do implement this vast amount of recovery funding designated to accelerate learning post-COVID. We will learn about the findings from recent national parent polls conducted by Tyton Partners, the National Parents Union, and the Walton Family Foundation, revealing that parents are ready for bold change in education and much more. Then we will hear commentary and reaction from leaders of local and national parent support and advocacy organizations who have conducted their own surveys and interviews of parents on the ground. And they will discuss how the results of these national polls align with what they're learning and what this means for their work going forward. And before we meet our featured speakers, I have the privilege of introducing our moderator and co-presenter, who is also our partner on the design of today's learning exchange, Christine Patterson of the Walton Family Foundation. Christine will then introduce our presenters and our commentators. Christine Patterson is the Senior Communications Officer for the K-12 program at the Walton Family Foundation. Before joining the foundation, she was a partner for EdCities, leading its national communications campaign, and an account director for Larson Communications. She also worked for Mary Corey A. Booker, Johnson & Johnson, and PBS. So welcome, Christine. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I have the privilege of facilitating today's discussion with some really incredible seasoned experts with diverse and unique perspectives on this moment and on both what the data is telling us, but also what change is looking like on the ground. So I'm going to jump into introducing our presenters and our commentators. You will hear me kind of introduce them now, but you will also see their bios in the chat as well. So Tanya Rosbash is a director in Tyton Partners Strategy Consulting Practice, having rejoined the firm in 2017 after pursuing her MBA at Harvard Business School, where she worked for Amazon Education, designing K-12 curricular products. Tanya has led more than 50 engagements with Tyton clients across the education ecosystem, including with the Walton Family Foundation. So incredibly impressed and grateful for Tanya's work, and really excited for you all to see the data from the recent report. Peri Lynn Turnbull is a longtime friend of mine who I have the privilege of learning from weekly, if not daily, who's a seasoned strategist with years of proven results in developing advocacy and communications initiatives for social change. Peri Lynn is an advisor to the National Parents Union, where she leads the national parent polling work to ensure that parent priorities are incorporated into the national narrative and policy making in public education. On the next slide, you can see our commentators for today. So Gloria Corral is the president and CEO of the Parent Institute for Quality Education. Her passion for education spans more than 20 years and includes work at the U.S. Department of Education, House of Representatives, and the Senate. Her expertise in education policy and system integration have also been informed by years of working with state departments of education, local and state nonprofits, advocacy organizations, and large school districts. So Gloria is going to bring perspectives from every level to this conversation. Staci Croom-Raley is the president and CEO of the Children's Equity Coalition. Her professional portfolio includes serving in senior leadership roles with Goodwill Industries, Boys and Girls Club, Boys Town USA, and most recently as executive director of Hippie USA. She credits those experiences with shaping her career towards advocacy and nonprofit leadership after an extensive career in law and government. And our last commentator to introduce is Adrián Pedroza, who is the National Director of Strategic Partnerships with Abriendo, Puertas / Opening Doors, a national parent leadership training program focused on supporting and equipping Latino parents with children 0 to 5 years of age in their quest to ensure early school success. Adrián served on President Obama's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for Hispanics, and he is a W.K. Kellogg Foundation Community Leadership Network Fellow. We got two more. Keri Rodrigues is also a very good friend of mine, and is Matthew Miles and David's mom, and the founding president of the National Parents Union, called arguably the most successful parent organizer in education advocacy today. Her outstanding commitment to social, economic, and educational equity for children and families spans decades. Rodrigues has worked as a senior advisor on dozens of nonprofit, ballot issue, and political organizing campaigns, both locally and nationally, and also got her start in broadcast radio, which I love to talk about. And for those of you who don't know Lakisha, who I feel like everybody should know Lakisha by now with the amazing work that Lakisha is doing, is the co-founder and CEO of the Oakland Reach, a parent-run organization founded to make the powerless parent powerful. She's dedicated her career to promoting access to quality schools because she knows firsthand that it changed lives. And when COVID-19 threatened to exacerbate inequities facing Reach families in Oakland, the Oakland Reach created the citywide virtual hub to support families economic survival and their children's educational success. Lakisha will talk about their new work in partnership with the Oakland Unified School District. So there's so much to get to. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya first. We're going to look at the data and then we're going to get into the commentators. Tanya's going to tell us a bit about the polling that Tyton conducted and what information and perspectives the questions were aimed to generate. So Tanya, take us away.
Great. Well, thanks, Christine, and thanks so much for the opportunity to share more about our research. At Tyton Partners, we've been conducting a longitudinal research effort that started this past fall to investigate the impact of COVID-19 on both parent agency and the K-12 ecosystem more broadly. Last week, we released the first publication in our 3-part series called School Disrupted, which is based on a fall 2020 survey of 3,000 parents across the US. We launched a second survey in February, March of this year, and have another survey to parents that will be out in the field in June. So I'll reference, at a high level, some of our findings here today, but encourage you to read our publication and those that are coming in the coming months. Our research has really been focused on the ways in which parents have explored and pursued different educational options for their children during the pandemic, including both, if we go to the next slide, both in school settings as well as out of school settings. And in particular, we have delved into what we call alternative education models, which are essentially, alternatives to traditional public, private, and charter options. So we focused in on homeschool, learning pod, and micro school models. At the highest level, if we go to the next slide, our data illustrates the ways in which COVID-19 has truly been a catalyzing event for parents and families over the past year. As of fall 2020, 15% of parents changed their child's school for this year, which is about 50% higher than pre-pandemic normal behavior. The result of these participation, inflows and outflows, as I call them, into different school models, was an overall net decline in public and private schools by about 2.6 million estimated students, and significant growth in alternative models. Homeschool, learning pod, and micro school participation grew more than 1.5 million students. In addition to this participation in alternative K-12 models, if we go to the next slide, 12% of parents sought the use of supplemental learning pods, which is really significant. And what we call, supplemental learning pods are essentially small group learning experiences where parents have kept their child enrolled in a core school, but yet have sought out these learning pods to supplement and enhance the school experience. I think originally when the news about learning pods came about that we've all followed, everyone assumed that they would fade when schools reopened. However, we've seen as the spring has continued, the use of these supplemental learning pods remain high with parents who have used them, who have their kids enrolled, expecting to continue going forward. Now the form, and format may change, but there's, I think, eagerness, in this sort of emerging trend. If we move to the next slide, a significant motivation for parents in making these changes for their children this year really was the disruption brought on by COVID and learning format in particular. So 40% of parents that switched their child's school did so for at least, one learning format related reason. And when we compare our data on switching schools to data that NCES has released from their NAEP 2021 school survey on the status of instructional models and in-person learning across the country, we see that it's positively correlated. So switching schools occurred at higher rates in communities and regions across the country where there were lower rates of in-person instruction offered. However,
hey Tanya, I'm just realizing we didn't maybe introduce the fact of where this data came from. So NCES released a lot of data recently, but do you want to talk about your data gathering methods for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of this data comes from our survey at Tyton that we released to parents in fall 2020. We had responses from 3,000 parents across the country. from, it's representative from a geography perspective, from an income perspective, and we have the data I just referenced on correlations. We have looked at, our data around switching across these 3,000 representative, parents and families to data out there from NCES and sort of the instance of remote, in-person, and hybrid instructional models.
Awesome, thank you, sorry.
Great. Even though the prompt, one of the main drivers for parents switching their child's school was learning format, and because sort of the disruption brought on by COVID, if we go to the next slide, one of the things our team has been really diving into, and if you can click through and just sort of bring the data up, has been around how is it going this year? Because the future depends not only on the reason you switched your child's school, but the experience that your child is having this year. And so when we look, this is essentially asking parents, how satisfied are they with their child's educational experience over 3 different time periods, from all the way on the left, fall 2019, pre-COVID, to fall 2020 as COVID came on this year, and now in spring 2021. You can see that red line is public school, and you can see that the satisfaction across many models dropped significantly as COVID came on and into the fall, and has been recovering. Private school, the light blue, follows a similar trend, but is much, much higher in terms of parent satisfaction. Homeschool, the yellow line you see there, is relatively steady. Now, what's really interesting is to look at that green upward line for Learning Pod as the core educational option, and how satisfaction has been growing over time and is much higher than public school now. And that dotted red line is a Learning Pod used as a supplemental solution in conjunction with any other model, is incredibly high, and may start to point us towards the future about what happens. The question of the future, if we move to the next slide, is one that we're asking parents directly. What do you plan to do going forward? And you can see the right bar here is what parents' plans are as of February and March, the last time we went out with our survey, what school option they plan for their child. You can see that there's a reversal in private school, so parents expect to go back next year at higher rates to their private school option. Charter school remains relatively steady. There's continued growth in the homeschool space, and some continued growth in Learning Pod and micro schools. So and you do see, right, a decline in public school there, but a huge undecided set of parents, many of them who are in the public school space and are trying to figure out what they will do next year. Now, some of the things may have, some of their plans may have shifted in the last few months, with especially sort of reopening and vaccine news. But I think the most important point here is that this growth that we've seen in seeking out alternatives, and the ways in which parents have seen their children experience alternative models this year, has been positive and is expected to continue at a certain rate.
Awesome. Tanya, any last points? Because I know, sorry, we have to go so quick.
No, that's great. I'd just say on the last slide, there's a story about equity here, right? The pandemic has exposed and exacerbated the inequities that exist across our society and in education. So that's been a huge piece of our work and findings as well. And who has access, while agency is rising, who has access to different models for their children. Thanks so much, Christine.
Thank you, Tanya. Tanya's going to stay on the line to answer questions. I know we've seen some come through in the Q&A and in the chat. And I would really encourage everybody to download and dig into their report, because there's so much information and leads to, anyway, it's great and fascinating. We're going to turn to my friend Peri Lynn to talk about the National Parents Union polling about parent appetite for change, and the parent experience right now. One of the things that's most unique about the National Parents Union polling is that they have been doing it consistently since last April, I believe, or maybe last summer. So there's a lot of longitudinal data to look across to understand the parent experience. So we asked Peri Lynn to talk about what's different now from when the pandemic started and where parents are looking to the future. So Peri Lynn, let me hand it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. And Christine's exactly right. This poll we started last spring. We were doing weekly polls, and then starting in September, we started doing monthly polls. And to some of the questions that were in the chat box and in the question box, our poll, I suspect Tanya's is the same, is nationally representative of the population. So in other words, we represent all of the race, income, education levels, and regions. And so what you see here is really what nationally on the aggregate are parents saying. And I really want you to take away 4 key things. One, parents have been worried throughout the pandemic and remain worried. And I'm going to show that. If you'd like to go to the next slide, I will share that. And we won't move slides yet. I just sort of want to run through the 4 top things, and I'm going to show you in graphs how we know this. So the first one is parents remain worried. Second, schools are not offering everything to meet individual students and families' needs, not unlike what we just heard from Tanya's presentation. We see that consistently in our poll as well. Parents want options. Not only do they want to be able to select the school that works best for their child, they want to be able to select the format in which their child is learning. So for both this year and next year, and this may be surprising for folks, they want both an in-person at school and an online at home option. And the final sort of high level thing I want you to take away from today is that there is a huge appetite right now. There always has been from parents, but right now we can really document a huge appetite from parents that want to see something different. Parents do not want schools to go back to the way they were before. It's sort of back to normal, as people have been describing. Not all schools are meeting all children's needs. And so there's this, real interest in reimagining. And we have a massive opportunity with the American Rescue Plan and all of the resources that are coming to schools. So first, when I talk about parents are worried, this chart, what you should be really taking away from this is a lot of red. That means that there's a majority of parents who are either worrying some or a lot about a variety of things, everything from keeping their child on track, their child's mental health, social well-being, someone in their family getting sick, and their own mental health. Even at the bottom at 51%, this has sort of trended over the pandemic, being able to make ends meet. So we know that this, can be anything from shelter, food insecurity, and economics. And then the last thing that parents just aren't as worried about, although interestingly, at the beginning of the pandemic last year, they were, just what to do with their children during the day. That is no longer a major concern. And if we can go to the next slide, I have 2 slides that just sort of show you the trends. I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but you can see that parents started worrying about all of these issues. These issues are really around their children's education. And they fluctuated a little bit over the year, but you see they started high and they've ended high. And if we go to the next slide, this is really a slide that demonstrates parents' concerns around their children's mental health, social well-being. Again, started high, and you see they remained high. So one of the things I'll just mention, I don't have a slide that shows this, but we track this. Only 4 in 10 parents say their schools are actually offering mental health services right now. So we know there's this really significant gap in ensuring children's social, emotional well-being is being cared for. So if we go to the next slide, when we ask parents, well, how do you think your school is doing right now on a variety of issues? We've tracked this from last year. At the top has traditionally been sort of this health and safety. Are they, meeting the health and safety measures? Are they, do they have quality instruction? And you see those are the 2 top bars. And for the most part, you can see there's a good percentage of parents who say their schools are doing excellent or good. What we're really concerned about is that the red bar here, or the red numbers on the right-hand side of the slide. There is anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of parents saying that their school is only doing fair or poor on a whole variety of things. And what has been absolutely consistent from the very beginning of the pandemic last year through now is that very bottom line. Are schools supporting children's social emotional well-being? So again, an emphasis on the mental health and the lack of it. And if we go to the next slide, what I want to share is sort of what parents have been thinking about the priorities. So this question here, we say, even if it's not like perfect, which of these 2 options do you think really reflects how you're thinking? The blue line is providing consistent, high quality online at home learning. And you can see over time, it's been the highest until this last month in April. And the orangey pink line has been, our priority should be getting kids back into the classroom in person. And for the first time during this pandemic, we see that as now top 50%. So we've seen, this is one shift we've seen over time. Parents were very much focused on having online at home, high quality instruction. And we've seen as the pandemic has progressed, a much greater percentage of parents hoping to have their children in person. Now, what's really interesting, if we go to the next slide, it does not mean that parents are actually asking for one or the other. They want both. So now on the left-hand side of your screen, what you're seeing is what parents are saying for the end of this school year. So for the rest of the school year, do you think schools should offer only remote or online at home? That's the green bar. Only in person at school, that's the blue bar. And neither of those have very high percentages. Look at the purple bar at the top. Parents, the majority of parents are saying they want both the online at home and the in-person at school option available, and they want to choose which one works best for their child. That's 62% for this year. But look at next year. That's the graph on the right-hand side. Still a really high 58% of parents saying they want to have both. So for a lot of school administrators right now, they're thinking we're just going to go back in person and that's it. Or, we're only going to offer an online. Please know that what parents are saying, at least at the national level, they want both and they want to choose the right option for their child. And we just have 2 more slides left, Christine, that sort of talk about the appetite for change. If we could go to the next slide, I will describe what this says. So something's happened here in the slide, but it doesn't matter because the color of the graphs and how high it is really still says the message. The orange bar on top is, should schools be rethinking or reimagining school? In other words, they want to see something different. And the blue bar is, no, let's just go back to the way things were. And you can see, although it's narrowed a little bit, still a majority of parents are saying we should reimagine. Let's take this opportunity to reimagine what school looks like. And again, just to repeat, not all schools were meeting all the needs of all children. And so there's definitely this appetite to have some change. And if you go to the next slide, this really does provide a good snapshot. We ask, do you think access to a high quality public education should be a civil right? And just overwhelming majority, right? It's always been above 70% of parents say, absolutely. We think this is something that we should just make a civil right. It requires the government obligated by law to provide it. And then there are actions parents can take if they don't feel like it's been fulfilled. And so I can't emphasize enough that parents remain worried, they want options, and they want to see change as schools reopen for the fall. And Christine, I don't know if I covered all the things you wanted me to cover, but if there are
You're good. You're good.
Okay.
That's a perfect ending and segue into the stimulus data. So what I'm going to be talking about quickly, sorry, let me just wrap up. You can see here on the screen where you can find all the data on National Parents Union polling. I'm assuming, Peri Lynn, you've got a poll in the field now. The next one for the month of May will be released. They're releasing them either the first or the second week of the month. So super timely, really quick turnaround. We're grateful to Peri Lynn because this is a incredible service that frankly has helped me learn quite a bit. So I'm going to get into a survey that Walton recently conducted of 2,700 parents. And the purpose and what's unique about this survey is actually the questions that we asked about the American Rescue Plan. So as you know, Congress approved a very, very big stimulus package that will result in $130 billion coming down to states. And that number is incomprehensible, frankly, to me, but will also result in numbers like 3,000 or 1,000 or $4,000 more a student per district. So what we wanted to do, given the local control, given the fact that these dollars are going to be distributed locally across the country, we wanted to understand what are parent priorities for these resources and how would they like them spent based on the experience of the last year. So why don't we quickly, I just want to hit a couple, let's go to my 4th slide. So can you, 1, 2, 3, can you fast forward? Next one. So the good news is there's widespread support for this money. In the next slide, there's also really a lot of support for the money that is coming from all the stimulus packages and a feeling that that amount of money is appropriate. Then in the next slide, building on what Peri Lynn said about the appetite for change, the overwhelming majority of parents want this money. to be used, not in support of just more and doing things the way we have, but actually in better and new. So this is a moment about reinvention, about innovation, and not just about recovery. And so I think that that's an important comment for people on this call to know as they think about how they want to advocate for local dollars to be spent as it relates to the stimulus changes. I'm going to get into, can we go forward a bunch of slides? So 1, 2, 3. Cool. So really quick, so what we did was we tested how parents would rank or how how parents would support a variety of spending priorities that we've heard talked about in the media, by policymakers, by advocates, by educators, by parents, even by students. So we aggregated a list of 14 to try to understand how would parents want this money to be spent and which of these types of initiatives and programs would parents want to use. So if you go into the next slide, the real message here in this slide is that support for a lot of really compelling and also really effective types of interventions and also re-envisioning of education is really high. So our pollsters message from this slide is like, this is a moment to go for it because parents are very attracted to the types of programs that everybody from President Biden down to school district leaders and parents on the ground are talking about. So if you just want to take a minute with this slide, you can see up at the top is CTE, as well as better resources, broadband, tools for parents, for tools for social and emotional health of kids, expanding pre-K, tutoring, really, really high support. If you go to the next slide, we asked parents to rank these, which they think is going to have the greatest impact. So you can see there that CTE, real life work experience and apprenticeship, supporting teachers, and social and emotional health remains at the top. I think, the reality is that everything except the bottom 2 ranks super, super high, and there's not a lot of delineation between them. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that a lot of the support for these various initiatives remains consistent across race, across income, and across geography. So I'll just give you a moment to kind of look and see where the things that you're looking for lie. College credits, CTE is definitely at the top. Teacher support is high. In our deck, in the analysis that you can find online, we dig a little bit more into the Black parent experience and what they are prioritizing because their responses are a little different and notable in many ways. So you can go to the Walton Family Foundation.org to download the full survey results. I'm trying to look at the head to say that the only other thing that I want to flag, if you can just start advancing quite a bit, is that there's really, really high support for both transparency and accountability with these dollars. So parents are reporting that they want to know how these dollars are spent. They want to know how these dollars are entering their community, and they want people to be held accountable for not only spending these dollars in the way that are going to have the greatest impact on kids, but also making sure that kids are the beneficiaries. If you keep going here, we've got a couple more slides. The next one. There you go. So overwhelming of parents want states to be transparent about the stimulus money. The importance of transparency is important across demographic lines, and then also that parents are reporting that it's very important that schools provide up-to-date assessments so teachers can understand where students are academically. So there's a lot more data in the presentation, but I want to stop because I want to make sure that we get to our commentators. So if you want to stop sharing the slide, I think there's obviously so much to dig into here, not just on the parent experience over the last year, thanks to Tyton kind of showing us where enrollment trends are headed, but also the emotional state of parents, what they want, what they're reporting that they want for their kids, what's most important for their kids in this moment, and how their behavior is going to change or adapt given the experience of their child. So we're going to ask this brilliant group of commentators to react for a couple minutes to the data that you all saw. Does this line up with your experience on the ground and what you're seeing and learning from parents and communities? So yes, our first commentator is going to be Gloria. We would love to hear a little bit about your organization and how this data lines up with what you're hearing from parents on the ground in California, and then how is parent perspective informing your organization's advocacy work?
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Fascinating data. The work that we do at Parent Institute for Quality Education, we are a social justice educational equity organization that is an evidence-based model of family engagement. And we do our work nationally. We partner with districts across 13 states, and then we provide direct service work in California, approximately 18,000 families across the state in multiple settings and geographies. And so we also, as many of our partners here, identified the need to really listen and ask families how they were experiencing the pandemic at different points in time. I talk about the pandemic really being an evolving crisis, not a crisis in time. And the families were experiencing that. And I think the three really important takeaways for us is that that it's important to recognize that the data, the surveys that we conducted with families were also a way of complementing what other partners were doing. And so we very specifically made phone calls to families in Spanish and in Mixteco. These were families that are predominantly on the wrong side of the digital divide. So actually doing online options and things like that just didn't exist. They really are disconnected. To give you a sense about the families that we served in the survey that we did, about 1 in 3 did not have an email address. About 20% of them did not have access to the internet. And so for us, the data that you just saw today really resonated in 3 important ways. One, and I think Tanya's slides that Tyton pointed out, that the income slide about the slide that really demonstrated the support or the use of public schools among low income, it was 58%. Fall 2019, it dipped because schools closed, right? And then it actually is back at 58% now. So for low income families, which are the families that we serve, public schools really are the one place that they can consistently send their children to school. Sending children to school now gets redefined. I do agree that with Peri Lynn, that I think this is the idea that we are hearing, is that because of health concerns, because of connectivity issues that still exist, especially in rural settings, what it means to be in school gets defined very differently now. The second really important thing that I think the data also bears out, both in Peri Lynn National Parent Unions and with Tyson's, is the need to really think about the holistic nature of the needs of families. Again, as we think about this as an evolving crisis, our data indicates that the parents' desire to holistically respond, both in terms of basic needs, but also access to educational opportunities, is really paramount, especially, like I said, to the families that we serve that are predominantly non-native English speaking, that have a high percentage of rural families. And so the resources and the connectivity are really important issues. The third thing that is really important as a way of complementing the work is that the relationship between what we traditionally think about home or in-home learning and school has fundamentally been redefined. And I think that's an important element for us to think about. Although the relationship has been redefined, I think attention to developing those bridges between schooling and home really need to be strengthened. And I think that's what families are saying. Reaching out to families in multiple ways, meaning, whether it's a robocall, whether it's social media, whether it's text, whether it's in person, whether it's home visiting. I think that is one of the consistencies that I see. It's that we need to look at the tool set that we hope school districts are now reimagining, because that's what parents need. What we're hearing from families is that, email may not be, as I told you, 30% of the families we serve don't have emails. And if that's the one method of communication, then you've already lost 30% of the families. So it's a combination of what is an effective communication strategy, because that's what leads to strong engagement. And we believe, from everything that you saw, parents' willingness and wanting to really think about these multiple strategies to engage in their child's learning, that is both online for those that can get online and that have broadband and can be supported, and also ability to communicate with the teacher in a way that is human to human, person to person. Relationships matter. And I think, to me, that's one of the consistent things that you see here, that whether it's micro schools, whether they're pods, all of those are contingent upon trusting relationships. And I think that that is one of the most important takeaways, is developing those trusting relationships in multiple ways. That's what our families are saying. That's what the data bear out. And I think that for us, in the work that we do, it's really recognizing that income and geography matter. And you saw this both in the parent union data, but also in the data previously, that who has access to those education options often is still predicated by your zip code, by your income level, and by your ability to speak English in a way that's proficient, that can support advocating for more choices. And that's the work that we do at BECA, is provide the families the information and the skills they need by building community with other families, so that they can advocate on behalf of their children for what they know is best for their children, whether it's one-on-one tutoring, whether that's social emotional supports, whether it's after school or before school care, all of which were important indicators and supports in order to really enrich and support the learning that happens in whatever setting, whether that setting is at home. A lot of our families were doing schooling in their car because they had to drive to a place where they had Wi-Fi access, or whether that's in a traditional kind of school construct or classroom. So it's about the relationship, and it's about making sure families have the knowledge, the skills, and the support to advocate on behalf of their children for accessing high quality educational opportunities.
Awesome. Gloria, thank you so much for that perspective and for tying the data to what you're seeing on the ground. We're going to stay in California. So Lakisha, I know that you have to hop, so I want to come to you next to make sure that we can hear about your amazing work in Oakland. So, we just heard from Gloria a little bit about the importance between the relationship and trusting adults, as well as the data that we heard from from Peri Lynn and from Tyton. How does that manifest in your work with the Oakland Reach and all the amazing things that are happening with the community hub that you've built?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I want to really talk about solutions. I think we have had a lot of conversations about the data and what parents want. I truly appreciate the data that's presented by Walton, Tyton, and specifically the National Parents Union. And I'm really assuming that your folks are on here because they want to figure out, what do we do about what families are saying that they want, right? Because we are now not in, the fall of last year. We are now at the close of a school year with a very short summer and a fall that folks need to figure out. So my answer to that is the hub, right? And I don't have a lot of time to talk, but what I would really like to focus on is sort of what parents have actually already created long, right when COVID hit, to really actually address many of the things that are showing up in the data that has been presented today. So somebody said, we went for it or going for it. And I wrote a note of like, yeah, we went for it on day one, because a lot of us were actually advocacy orgs, right? Moving, pushing for policy wins, running campaigns, really doing the things on the advocacy side, focused on moving to better educational outcomes and quality, right? And when COVID hit, we in Oakland, we had a decision to make. Our decision is, okay, well, we were already in an education crisis before we even hit a health crisis. Now that these babies are at home with their parents, are we going to try to turn them back into a system that has like generationally failed them, has systemically failed them? Or are we going to take this as an opportunity to actually show them how the hell, excuse my French, we want our own kids taken care of and educated? And for those of you guys who have access to the links that are coming in the chat, I will ask you to follow along with me, because so much of what's been presented, we have already created, and we've been running it for over a year, okay? So we don't need to be like, what's the answer? What's happening? And the reason I'm saying this is because it's coming directly from the families. So if you click on the hub link in there, I want to tell you, and this is going to sort of hit on all of these pieces, right? When we start talking about reimagining education and what families want, even when I was looking at the National Parents Union data, where in their last slide, they were saying something about, hey, the numbers are still pretty high for the ways that families want education to be reimagined, even though there's sort of a narrowing. And the reason why I say that there's even a narrowing in that data is because of the fact that we have done a piss poor job at actually showing families what different opportunities look like, okay? So the reason why they may be regressing is because we spent so much time talking and not enough time showing folks what's possible, right? And this is exactly why the hub was created. I hate it was created in this little cool city called Oakland. And although I've done at least 100 webinars, it seems like it hasn't gotten out to enough people. So I just really want to stay focused with you guys on a solution. I think I'm down to 3 minutes, which I don't think is fair, but we're going to keep moving. Just follow along with me on this link, okay? So number one, this hub is what we call the porterhouse steak, okay? You know, our families have been fighting for equality or utopia that they've actually never experienced. You fight for something that you've never seen. So you know what? We said, well, let's just build the thing. Let's build the privilege. Let our families feel, taste, and smell the privilege, right? Can you imagine looking outside of a restaurant, looking into a window and seeing somebody cut into a steak, and then, or versus sitting at the table and you cutting into the steak? It's a difference if someone tells you outside the window, hey, Lakisha, you need to keep moving along. We can't have people looking inside. And you kind of put your head down and you're like, oh, okay. But be at the table, cutting that steak and eating it, and have the waiter come and take it. You're going to hit him on the hand with the fork. This is mine. I deserve it. I'm supposed to get it. And that is what this hub is about. We have codified over this year the 5 components of what makes a hub. A hub is just a name. A pod is just a name. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's underneath the hood of what you're actually creating. So all hubs are not made the same, and not all pods are made the same. You got to look at what's underneath. And this hub, I tell you guys, what came directly for the aspirations and needs of families who have far been away from the table, okay? So again, how many more minutes I got? Am I at 2.5? I'm gonna go quickly, you guys. I'm a team player, but I wanna make sure that I'm highlighting a few things. There's 5 components of our hub that come directly from the needs of families that I wanna highlight. One is high quality academic instruction. Duh. Our parents want their kids getting access to the best. The thing I want to share about that, though, which is most important, you can read examples, you can read things on the page, but we did not build this hub to be virtual versus in person. It's virtual because last time I checked, we were in the middle of a pandemic. But the reason why we built it is to actually show the system, both locally, statewide, and nationally, what quality model of education looks like and needs to be for our families. So this hub, even though it's called a virtual family hub, it can also be implemented in person, as long as you have these 5 components, okay? Number 2 is social emotional enrichment. So it's a lot of what I heard folks say about mental health, right? We have done so much around mental health, but again, we listen to our families and we build the solutions. So we have brought in Latino and African-American mental health experts to actually do working groups with our families. We're doing a whole explosion of this summer. Whatever you do, whatever you create, you have to remember that there is stigma in both the African-American and Latino communities around mental health supports. So you have to make sure that people who look like us are coming to talk to us about our challenges and issues around mental health, period, and very specifically in the pandemic, okay? So we can talk about all the different things we will create around this, but the number one thing we're doing is listening to parents, helping them be leaders. Some mental health supports just actually require parents being in connection with parents and leading groups where they can just vent and talk and get supports. Other things are more structured. So it needs to be organic and it needs to be structured, okay? Number 3, community support, okay? That is the family liaison. I will tell you this on everything. The family liaison is a game changer when it comes to supporting low-income Black and brown families. Many districts have family liaisons, but they got 1 or 2 family liaisons for like 400 kids, and we're already working from a deficit. We have 1 family liaison to no more than 25 families. This way you can get really in there and really, really support families. Everything from attendance to advocating, also to just, hey, I'm having a bad day and I need someone to talk to, okay? So that's really huge. We also have something called the Family Sustainability Center. We really designed this as a vision to be the place. One thing we said to ourselves when COVID hit, we were one of those organizations that said, hell with this. We've already been suffering. We're going to use this as an opportunity for our families to be thriving at the end of this and not just surviving this pandemic. So whatever we build, we're about to take our parents to the next level. You know what I'm saying? With this. And so what that looks like is that our parents get a combination of both academic and socioeconomic resources. We got families who are signing up for entrepreneur business boot camps. They're going back to get their GEDs. They're going back to learn how to read. They're going back to get their BAs. They are sitting at home and like, how can I change the game for my whole family? See, the education system has so far ignored low-income Black and brown families. And I will tell you this, they're ignoring them now with the school reopening conversation. Every time I talk to somebody about school reopening and what Black and brown families want, I get, well, you know about the learning loss. Have you seen the learning loss data? Guess what? We've been in a perpetual learning loss probably for the past 50 years. So of course a pandemic will exacerbate that. Tell us something we don't know. Listen to what the families have to say. If you don't listen to what they say, they're going to go right while the system's going left. And then groups like ours are going to have to advocate to make sure that they don't get penalized for taking care of their families. 2 more things I want to add before I jump off. Tech training, okay? This tech component is important. Everybody knows that tech is a game changer. It's already been a game changer. Everybody besides our parents have been running their organizations, running their businesses, taking online classes, doing everything to advance themselves to technology. But guess who's had the limited access to this kind of game-changing pathway? Low-income Black and brown families. No internet access, no technology. And Oakland is in the backyard of Silicon Valley. How is Silicon Valley going to diversify their workforce if the families that live 30 miles away don't even have internet access in them, and the schools don't even have setups for that? It's a full bamboozle game. So the huge thing that we're doing with tech, besides the fact that we are providing real-time tech infrastructure, yeah. And guess what? Hotspots are not tech infrastructure, by the way. We have got to have a collective national move around broadband internet access that is free. We have to get broadband internet access, but we need to use technology to advance the economic mobility of our families and the pathways for our kids. These kids are not going to be working at Google with the ways that their homes are set up. And last but not least is economic development. This hub has provided jobs, not just directly into we have doubled our team because we've doubled the number of parents we supported through the hub, but we have also just helped the school district, our own school district, hire 30 or 40 new folks, family liaisons and literacy tutors. So we have Black and brown mamas and grandmas, okay, aunties and uncles who are learning how to be literacy teachers. Do you know what a difference this is going to make in terms of how our kids read? Oakland can't be the only city with abysmal literacy rates, but nobody ever thought about empowering the actual families who are suffering from those low rates to be at the table to actually do something about it. But that's exactly what we're doing in Oakland, right? The main thing I'll say when I close up, we have a solution. Replicate the hub. The hub can look 7 ways from Sunday, depending on the city. It could be in person, it could be virtual. But what it has is these 5 components that if you implement them with thought, fidelity, and the leadership and aspiration of families, you cannot lose. This is reimagining education. And we've been doing it since the minute they shut schools down, because for everybody on here who's an advocate, this thing is not a new problem. People are just paying attention to it now. And because they're paying attention to it, we got something for them. So I just want to just implore everybody. They gave us the data. We got the data. What are the solutions? Okay. And I'm done. I think I hit my 5 minutes. Hopefully I didn't go over too far.
Lakisha, thank you so much for this. Before you have to hop, I hope that you take a minute to scroll up in the chat. You've got a lot of grateful audience members for not only your passion and commitment
I haven't seen anything. Okay,
and dedication to this work, but also just the resources that you're creating and your openness and willing to share. I also find this 2-pager incredibly helpful. So I'm going to put this in the chat in case people didn't get to that as well. But the 2-pager that is linked through the web page that you offer. So Lakisha, thank you so much. Thank you for designing these solutions, and congratulations on the work that you've been able to do. I know there's a long road ahead, but thank you for this tremendous work. I am going to turn to Keri. Ms. Rodrigues, are you there? Turn on your camera for me. Looking for you. There you are. There you are, my dear. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh,
Can
great. Oh, I can. Your audio is a little rough. So let me, if it's okay with you, maybe you could dial in and let me go to somebody else first, if that's okay. And then I'll come back to you. So Staci, I'm going to ask you to talk about this. Lakisha talked about it from the California perspective. What about Arkansas? So if you could just give us a little bit about what's happening on the ground there, how this data is manifesting on the ground, and also any solutions that you're seeing at this really important time.
Absolutely.
I see you've come up. There you are. Yeah, if you just want to turn your camera on.
I couldn't turn my camera on because we were having some technical difficulties, but the most important part is the conversation we're having, and not really, you guys don't care what I'm wearing today. So
or people have to look at me. Sorry that you have to keep looking at me. Anyway, Staci, go ahead.
So one of the things about hearing Lakisha speak is that I'm always saying amen, amen, amen. And going behind her has actually made this part of the presentation really easy for me, because for us, we really wanted to step back. We'd spent many years as a national player and really helping providers on the ground. But what the pandemic told us was that the people who were really making the solutions were the boots on the ground. They were the people who were in the trenches. And we wanted to hear from providers, and we wanted to hear from families directly about what they needed, but it wasn't just enough to hear from them. What was more important was that we wanted to put them in the driver's seat. And this is not a comfortable place for providers, because we like to say we have the perfect product, we have the perfect intervention, and you use it, it will change your life. And we know that is not the case. So when I see the data, and especially looking at the commentary or listening to the commentary about people who are saying they want bold change, they want to continue to have options, this is exactly what we're hearing from our parents. And we've been working with a lot of state and local leaders who are asking us, we've been putting a lot of money into systems that are currently in place, and we're about to get even more money to put into systems. Is there a different way in which we can do it? And if there's one thing that I want to make very clear, is that our organization, and looking at equity, is that we have to look at every single system that has been used for disseminating resources to communities, and we have to challenge that and say that there may be better ways to get money to communities and to get resources to families. When I look at the data and it talks about bold change, that bold change is parents saying, you know what, for the last year and a half, I've had to step in and help be my child's educator. And I like that feeling. It was a lot. I feel like I need a break, but I took ownership in that. I have pride in that. And I want to be a part of that going forward. So, one thing I can share with everybody is, as we were starting to reassess and reorganize what we wanted to do in our organization and really take it to a more hands-on local level, I listened to people like Lakisha and said, how can we take this message to a different audience that's looking at some of the same things, and how can we give parents a forum? And so that's the first thing that we've done, is we've created 2 forums, 2 places where parents can actually share information directly to us, and we are challenged. Not we have a solution for you, not come and sit on our board or come and be on our panel or speak at our conference. This is actually your forum, and you tell us what it is that you want to do. And we're challenged to go bring those resources to you. We're challenged to put you in a position or a place to have your voice be heard. And then the second group is the providers, because providers are saying, I'm overwhelmed trying to provide resources to families. I have one thing I'm supposed to be doing, but families have a lot of other factors that are going on. So when you hear folks like Lakisha say that parents are going back to school and they're getting training and they're getting education, that is absolutely what we hear from our families. Yes, they want education to look differently. They want to have options for their children. They want to be a part of the solutions and the conversation about what school is going to look like going forward. But they also want you to come to the table with resources to help them change the future for themselves and for their families. And so for us, and our message today is when we create resources, and we have resources that we'll be releasing later this summer, one of them is to balance the playing field for parents. Parents are saying to us, what is social emotional and how do I get my child ready for that? Because the truth is that if children don't have that, they're already going to be struggling. And we all know, whether we want to say it out loud or not, is that that can be detrimental for any child. But not knowing social and emotional things that are and fundamentals before entering the classroom can be detrimental to children of color, especially little Black children. So we have to own that, and we have to make sure that parents are in the driver's seat about that. And absolutely, if they want to be the decision makers of what happens, then we need to respond accordingly. And that's what our organization is designing itself to do.
Thank you, Staci. The message here is power to the parents. So thank you for that great work, and we're excited to see what comes out later this summer, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of good ideas for it to be shared far and wide. I see Keri. There you are. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me better?
Cool. I can hear you better. So, you've heard from Gloria and Staci and Lakisha about some of the solutions that are happening on the ground. I know that you are connected with thousands of parents across the country through the National Parents Union, and that a lot of this data, is something that you've all been able to use to drive strategy and to support parents on the ground. So talk a little bit about, the work with parents that's happening, what you're seeing at a national level, and how you're building that up from the local.
Yeah, so the National Parents Union is an organization of more than 500 groups across the country in all 50 states, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. And we're not just creating our own data, as you just saw. That's a parent-created poll. Those questions are so powerful. This poll is leading the conversation in the national media because we created it. We're the folks closest to the pain. We know what questions to ask before folks have even thought about it, because we're doing the work on the ground. So I think that in and of itself has been powerful in advocacy, in changing the education conversation, because parents are driving the conversation through this polling. And now we're operationalizing it. I was in the car, and I apologize because I was in an organizing meeting operationalizing that data, because I got data and we're going to move it. I'm creating an army of accountability warriors, because all this money is coming down to districts, and every parent in America is going to be armed with information to hold districts accountable for what they're doing with that money. We know what to ask for. We're being invited to the state tables. We have a list of 10 things we want to see in the classroom, 10 things we want to see in schools and across districts that we were very fortunate to create with our friends at the Center for Reinventing Public Education. That we created after we talked to all of our affiliates all across the country. We had conversations. We talked to parent advocates. We ran it through our policy committee. We talked about it. We focus grouped it. We polled it. We asked parents questions, and then we said, okay, now we feel good. We know what to ask for at these damn tables. And before you cash that check, you better check this box. And these are the things we're going to be looking for. So that's our campaign. Don't cash that check before you check this box with parents, because we have things that we're going to be asking for. And we're going to be looking for receipts. There are very specific things we're looking for, including that high-speed internet. We're not looking for $10 internet anymore. We want every kid in America to have access to high-speed internet, and not just $300 Chromebooks that break down. They're not meant to be used for 5, 6, 7 hours a day for 15 months. We need equipment, we need technology, we need innovation, we need Lakisha in, in all of these hubs across America. And so expect us to be the 1-2 punch. We're going to be holding folks accountable and making the space so that Lakisha can come in and hubs can happen across this country, because parents want this innovation that frankly parents have created in Oakland, and we're ready for that. So what we're doing is operationalizing. We're not waiting. And frankly, we have learned in this journey in education advocacy that nobody's coming to save us. So we are making sure we have powerful data. We are making sure we are well prepared, we are organizing, and we're ready to be accountability warriors. So expect us, and expect us
Keri,
place.
Keri, talk a little bit about how this data, and the work that you're doing with the 500 organizations across the country is being used. I saw on the 74 that you all got to meet with Secretary Cardona. So what was his reaction to this feedback, and what's your role in making sure that parent voice is at that table, that very important table?
Absolutely. So what we have been doing is we started engaging with the Biden team, back before the election even happened. We were engaging with the Trump administration. We were sending them letters. We were sending them our recommendations. We were taking our place at the table before we were invited, with the expectation that of course you want to hear from us. And of course you should hear from us. These are our children. This is our money. These are our schools and our communities. Yes, you need our feedback, and we're here to give it to you, and here it is. So we were engaging with them before they were ready. And then they started to say, this is very interesting. We need this data. Oh, tell us more. Then the Biden transition invited us to brief them, the Ed Art team. And then, we were invited with a whole bunch of, social justice groups to go in and have even more conversations, and then additional conversations. And then we started meeting with the new chief of staff for Secretary Cardona. And then we were invited to take a place in the kitchen cabinet so that we can give him regular briefings as to what we're seeing on the ground, and help to set up regional meetings across the country so that he can have real connections with parent advocacy groups. But we said to him very clearly that, we're not here to participate in the dog and pony show. We have real solutions to offer, and we expect to be a part of the policy conversation. And it's not just about us. It's about bringing everybody to the table. So I want Lakisha Young at that table. She's got the solutions. She needs to be right there, literally driving this conversation, and she will be, because that's what we're building here, is that we're not just winning these seats at the table, but we're making sure the right people are at the table. People like Kulia Pringle, who is helping to drive, the conversation in the federal work group around school climate and school discipline, talking about cops in schools and the brand new instruction that is coming down in just a few weeks around school climate and school disciplinary changes, which is going to blow the doors off of, the education conversation, which it needs to happen right now. This is being rewritten and driven a conversation by parents around what we're going to do in that situation as well. So, we've come into this situation, wanting to be a part of the conversation, preparing warriors to take their seats. And I think it's a beautiful thing, but we can't just come with anecdotes, and we know that, which is why it's so powerful to also have the data, to have the information, because it's very easy to have your story, your tale of woe dismissed if you don't have the data to back it up. So we've learned that lessons as advocates and people who've worked in social justice. I've worked in social justice for more than 20 years now, and I know that, you've got to have the facts, the figures, the documentation, the polling, all of that. So it's been critically important to inform our campaigns on the ground, and frankly, helping to co-create and collaborate around literally writing policy and legislation. That's what we do too. That's what we've done here in Massachusetts. We just wrote a $2.2 billion education funding package that required every district in the Commonwealth to write a 3-year achievement gap killing plan. Every single district, and they just did it. They just had to do it. So parents are powerful. They can make things happen. We can write policy, legislation, and hold these folks accountable. And we're going to do it. Watch us.
God bless. Keri Rodrigues, everybody. Thank you, Keri, for sharing that exciting update. Last but not least, we have Adrián. There you are, Adrián. So not only are you also working on the ground with parents, but you are also doing your own polling and understanding the landscape. So just talk a little bit about that, what we might learn from your important work.
Yeah, first off, just want to thank the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and everyone here that has spoken. I really enjoyed just listening to all that was said and listening to really the solutions, right? I think that's what we're all here for, and that's what the theme has been on this after discussion. You know, we also did our own, surveying and interviewing of 1,200 Latino parents across the country, surveyed in both English and Spanish, both rural and urban areas. And, I'm not going to repeat, the challenges that we've heard over and over that parents were citing. I will say that we did find, and we did disaggregate the data looking at rural and Spanish speaking parents, and really across all indicators is Spanish speaking parents were talking about solutions. They were Spanish speaking parents were really citing that at a higher percentage level that they wanted more individualized education, more tutoring, and they wanted to ensure that communications, right, and that the advocacy and the work that we're doing on the ground was engaging to them in the language, right, that they speak at home and in our communities. And I know that's true for many of our immigrant communities across the country, right? As we do this work, as our systems, we build out these systems and do this advocacy work, we need to ensure that we're doing it in multiple languages, so we're engaging parents and meeting parents where they're at, communities where they're at. And I know many of our partners on this webinar agree, right, with that, and do that work on the ground to ensure that we're inclusive of all parents. We also did find that parents and families in rural communities were really looking for support around meeting the educational challenges of their children. And so as parents were concerned about their children falling behind across all subject areas from math, reading, science, and writing, parents in rural communities were reporting higher percentages of that concern, right? I think really looking at that, we know that parents and families in rural communities many times have less resources, less access to libraries, to broadband internet. And so we really need to work, right, to ensure as these federal dollars come down, that our migrant farm working families in rural Texas and in rural Florida, right, really have access to these resources. At Abriendo Puertas, opening doors, we work with families with young children from 0 to 5. That's our focus. We've been working over the last 15 years to really invest and honor parents as a child's first teacher and advocate. And we work with incredible implementing partners across 40 states that do that work on the ground, right? We've heard from a lot of the panelists here today, a lot of the discussion, really about localized solutions, right? And that's what this really comes down to, right? We have these, we know what the data says nationally. We could probably disaggregate it, by community or by city. But the solutions, as we've heard today and this afternoon, really come to that work on the ground, right? To creating these partnerships between schools, government, and community-based organizations and advocates to ensure that these dollars, these federal dollars, are really put to work for the solutions that parents and families are looking for, right? And that looks different in every community. We heard about different models, right, that we can apply to different communities, right? We can do that. We have a general idea. We know what the research shows about what works, right? Holistic approaches to education, more individualized, more personalized education, starting early, right? At early childhood, at birth. We know these things work. Now, how do we actualize it? How do we put them to action? Well, it really is that local solution, right? About engaging parents at the local level with their local school, the local government, organizing, right? To ensure that the solutions that they're offering actually get actualized, right? And that not only are they actualized, but that we're seeing the investments, right, go beyond our school districts and our public education departments, and that they're actually resourcing, right, the work that we just heard, right, in these remarks from Lakisha, right, from Keri, from Gloria, that the actual partnerships are actually getting funded and the budgets are being shared with community-based organizations, with parent-led solutions. And we at Abriendo Puertas just look forward to working with our partners on seeing this work through. And look forward to the continued discussion. I'll go ahead and stop now because I know folks have been listening to us for quite some time and we have some questions on the chat. Thank you.
There's a lot of amens. And thank you, Adrián, especially for talking about the experience of rural families as well, which we know when we talk about equity are so often inequitably served by the system and have a disproportionate impact from COVID. We're going to move into the Q&A, but I would like to ask, I know we have a special panel participant in the audience today, Lisa Guarnzi of New America Foundation. So Lisa, I want to kind of hand it to you to do part Q&A, but also just share a little bit more about your research and New America's perspectives, given your unique role nationally and federally. So is Lisa there? Lisa? Maybe missing Lisa. Okay, let's give Lisa a second to come off mute, and let me kind of kick a question out to the panelists that we've seen come through in the chat about engaging with local officials related to the influx of stimulus money. So Keri, you talked about your accountability committee. So I just wanted to give a chance to talk to, or I'm sorry, your transparency. What did you say? You said don't cash the check before you check the box. So I'm just wondering, Gloria, Adrián, or Staci, if there's any other work that you wanted to talk about related to the stimulus and your local advocacy work. And Keri, obviously, if there's anything you want to add, but I'm going to have your don't cash the check saying in my brain for the rest of the day. Gloria, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add, because I completely agree with Keri and the work that about accountability, is that as we have been doing our work with the families, it's, I think, two things that really that we've been working on directly. One is to actually ensure that families understand kind of what is it that you're checking, Keri, to your point earlier, right? Is that where is this money? What is the intention of the money? You need to understand that, and then what are your rights and how to advocate effectively. I think those are the two pieces that we've been focusing on, Christine, because I think one of the reasons why building that bridge can be challenging is if there isn't accessible information. I have to tell you, I spend a lot of time in our organization actually translating what gets written so that families can actually understand. And I use this example. I've been in education over 25 years. And I tell you, the only time I had ever seen the word asynchronous instruction was in all the geeky, like journal stuff that I read, because that's what I do. I read and I do research, right? I have to tell you, that vocabulary building element, that's what we spent April and May and June of last year educating our families of what asynchronous instruction meant, or Wi-Fi or hotspots. I mean, these were words that really weren't there. So I would say, I think, I'm a huge supporter of all the work that has been laid here. But I would say, Christine, that's the added piece that we've been focusing on, is on the educating part, because once parents understand in a way that's accessible, then that draws them into action, because every parent is their child's strongest and fiercest advocate. And that's the piece of the puzzle that we add, is how do you do that in a way that's meaningful, that's culturally and linguistically responsive? And we do that by ensuring that the information is accessible, that parents have ability to, in partnership with other families, create community so that they aren't the lone voice, right? That there's a shared dream, and that the accountability becomes not of me as a parent, but of us as a community. And so I would say that those are the two pieces that we've been spending quite a bit of time, especially to get to the accountability piece, so that they understand in a way that empowers them, and then that they are given opportunities to test out, talking to a legislator, with a colleague of theirs, with another parent, right? We do these scenarios, we help them, we record them so they can see themselves, right? Like, so that they feel comfortable and feeling empowered. But it starts with making sure they have access to the information in a way that recognizes that they have different on-ramps. And that
Gloria, I just wanted to say that's so important, and I don't want to make it sound easy. Like, we've been working with our parents for 5 years here in Massachusetts to build these warriors that go and demand this stuff. And frankly, we've even been we've been teaching our legislature and teaching our commissioner how to treat us too, so that they know better. Like, we went up and we testified in Spanish, and we didn't provide translation to show them how it feels when somebody speaks to you and you don't have translation. It's not so nice, is it? Like, it's very difficult when someone's trying to tell you something and you're trying to understand and you don't have access. That's right. So like, we've done demonstrations and actions to show them like how painful these things are, and it's very difficult. So sometimes, like, this takes building. You know, it takes a lot of work, and it takes building warriors too, because it's hard. When you're an average parent, it's not easy. Like, this doesn't come naturally. Like, these are skills that require, you know, this is a skill set. But when it comes to this moment, translation, interpretation, like making sure that we're not using language that makes this information inaccessible to parents, because we do that a lot in education. Like, we use language that's almost intentionally keeping parents from understanding what we're trying to say. Like, do we need to say asynchronous? Like, what are you trying to say to me here? Is it live instruction or not a live instruction? Why do you need to say that?
Is it recorded or is it in person?
Like, are you trying to talk to me or you're not? Like that, I literally said that to our commissioner. I said, you're going to come into a town hall. We have 1,200 parents for you. Don't say asynchronous on this thing. I'm telling you right now, don't do it. Like, you use language, because they're going to come for you, and they're going to ask you questions that you probably answered 10,000 times, but you got to answer these questions, because this is how you build relationships and trust with folks. So I think what you said is
Staci,
beautiful.
Staci, is there something?
I'm just have a burning desire to say this, because I agree with my colleagues here. But the other thing that we've been saying to local decision makers and state decision makers is it's not a one and done. You can't ask for parent feedback one time and think you've got it, and then you walk off the stage and that's it. You have to create a place for parents to continuously bring what they need and bring their thoughts, concerns, what have you to it. And that holds providers accountable, because you know, I'm going to see you again and I better have an answer, or I better have responded to what you said you needed. And I think that's important. And we've shared that with our mayor's office, and I feel very, very confident that they've taken all of that to heart.
Adrián, anything to add to this?
No, I think Staci really hit it home, right? Is that continuous, investment, that continuous, not just engagement, but, really is investment, time, resources, in parent leadership, right? And Gloria and Keri really described that well, that, in the end, we're really movement building here, right? This is a long-term, right, investment. And I know everybody here is in it for the long haul. We've been at it for some time at various levels. And that's what it's going to take now. Let's make sure these federal dollars, right, get invested in these initiatives, and we're not sort of, an afterthought, right, as these budgets are allocated. We need to make sure that these initiatives are funded at the, at significant levels to ensure that these investments in this leadership development continues.
Right. The opportunity is now. Lisa, I see you. Yeah. Lisa from New America. Here. Do you want to talk a little bit about your research coming up? It sounds really exciting and very illuminating.
Yeah, really quickly. And just a big thanks. This has been such an energizing conversation. I'm thrilled to be just even be able to hear all of this. At New America, just for the very same reasons you all described, just how important it is to get parent voice much more elevated in these policy conversations. We have built out and we finished collecting the data on a national phone survey of parents that are below the median income level, so that we can really understand what it's been like for low income families. And then we can also differentiate across race and language and immigrant status and all sorts of different things for those families. And we've been hearing in those surveys that parents are finding that things were working when they were networked in their communities. And so we have the voices of parents from 3 different cities, because we also did focus groups in 3 different cities with in-depth conversations with parents of the same demographics in Spanish and English. And so there's learning to be done from parents, but policymakers need to hear what that is. So we're hoping that this new data that we'll be releasing on June 24th will add to this really urgent push that you all have been able to really lift up here. And it will be able to be infused into what the school year looks like for for the 21-22 school year, because something's got to change. And it becomes clear even in the data that we're seeing too with these in-depth conversations with parents, that there were things that they want to hold on to from the pandemic, that closer connections they might have, but there are also so many things that went wrong and that have got to be fixed, and that were wrong before the pandemic that have to be fixed. So we'd love to have you all at that event, June 24th, it's 12 p.m. Eastern. Jessica Rosenworcel, who is the acting FCC chair, will be our keynote, and we have an NPR reporter, Anya Kamenetz, who will be moderating our panel. And we'll make sure all of you guys can get the invite for that. But thanks for the opportunity to tell you about it early.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. I see the questions that are coming into the chat. A bunch of them talk about the stimulus spending and also parent and also advocacy as it relates to like what are schools and systems required to do as it relates to incorporating parent input. And I think, you know, I'm not a legal scholar here, the answer is very little. And so to quote Keri, you know, nobody's going to give you a seat at the table. You've got to go get it. So does anybody want to react to just how schools are powerful ways that schools or districts have been soliciting feedback from parents and incorporating parent perspectives into not just their stimulus planning, but their return to school planning and things like that?
I'm just going to jump in really quick and ask folks, they see the poll in front of you while we're hearing these answers, please complete our poll. We really appreciate your feedback. Thanks.
So we have parents in about 22 states that are participating in state level ESSER conversations where they're literally a part of the planning and instruction that is going down to the district level. And then, you know, at the district level in fits and starts, we have parent groups that are participating in those at various levels. I'll tell you what's really bad and lame would be parent surveys. So if you think that that's going to cut it, that's like the worst thing you can do. So don't do that. That's not parent engagement. That's not a good way to get parent feedback. Don't do it. What is a good way is to invite us to the table to collaboratively co-create. We actually have some really good ideas like investing in high-speed internet and technology and having an individualized education plan for every child in America. We have so much money and we have the resources, high, you know, intensity tutoring, all of these things. We have really good ideas. And if you do it with us, when the money runs out, we will actually fight for you to keep the money so that these programs will continue. It's actually a really good idea to do this with us so that politically you can keep it going. So think ahead and, you know, you might actually have a better way of doing this in the future too.
Christine, I think the one thing that I would say in addition to what Keri mentioned is that think about community outside the school walls. And really do kind of the partnership building with other community-based organizations that are in fact kind of doing the work that Keri was mentioning, right? That we have been there in the case of Pique in communities for 34 years. You know, it's this idea that we are in partnership with districts. And I think there are multiple ways of soliciting feedback. And I think that to me is a really important takeaway is that for some families, a survey might work great. For a lot of families, a home visit works great, and we need to be able to respond to the needs of the families and the particulars of a community. You know where it doesn't work great, where it's and this is happening in California, and as I'm sure it's happening across the country, right? Where the survey is an online survey, and like I said, 30%, you know, like a quarter of parents like literally don't have internet access. So by default, you are already not doing that. Or it's an email survey and 30% of families don't have an email address, right? So I think it's really about thinking very specifically with their school districts in partnership about what are the community assets? What are those trusted messengers? Because I'll tell you, as Keri said, you know, Keri calls a meeting and 1,200 parents arrive, right? Because there's this trust in this relationship. And so it's both about communicating, right? And it's also about strategies, and they don't go at opposite ends. It's by bringing them together, what is the best way to communicate? And there are multiple ways to do that. And it's a collection of these various strategies, home visits, right? One-on-one phone calls, right? Focus groups, right? Town hall meetings, all these things collectively, I think is what really gets us to this partnership dialogue about getting family feedback and engagement. That to me is, I think, one of the things that we take away with, because in California, you know, the 6th largest economy in the world, massive, we recognize that if we did one approach, like Adrián would say, right, then you get one kind of family and that's it, right? And there are a lot of different perspectives and families, and they all want to tell you what's best for their children and themselves.
I just have to jump in and say, because we're at 4:30 and this could go on and on and on. And we always think, you know, 90 minutes, it's a lot of time to hold folks' attention, but this has been so important. First, to hear that incredible data, the findings that we have, what parents are saying, and then to hear our incredibly important and well knowledge and connected to parents. All of you, thank you so much for this incredible conversation, this incredible discussion. Kind of exciting that there's yet another one that we know is hosted by New America coming up the end of June. The Campaign for Grade Level Reading will absolutely have additional discussions around this very topic. So please do register for our future webinars. We did mention the ones that are next week. Not specifically focused on the same topic, but all still important topics. So sad that we have to wrap this up. Thank you to each and every one of our speakers. Thank you, Christine, for your brilliant moderation and managing all these great questions. And if we did not get to your question today, we're sorry. I know that our speakers were answering questions in the Q&A. We will try to grab your questions and make sure to get back to you and make sure that you were able to connect with the speakers from today. So thank you, everybody. We're a minute over. We really appreciate this incredible conversation. Thank you.